Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 2022 Council Agenda Briefing. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I'd like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that audio recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interest and interests affecting impartiality, and are reminded to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, welcome. Item 1 is the declaration of opening, and I declare this meeting open at 6 p.m. Items for council. Item agendas 2, 3, 6, 7, 8.1, 8.2, 9, 11, 13 and 14 will be dealt with at the ordinary council meeting to be held on 27 September 2022. Item 4 is attendance. Item 4.1 is apologies. We don't have any apologies this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence, of which there are nil this evening. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Councillors, does anyone have any interest that they wish to declare this evening? Councillor Choi?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in relation to item 10.4.3, action on condition of planning approval, Civic Heart, the owner and the CEO and the CEO's wife of Finbar are known to me.
And that's an impartiality interest, Councillor Choi?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay. We now move on to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.3 is deputations. This evening we have 13 speakers who will have up to 10 minutes to address council. And just a reminder to all parties, I understand that there might be some items on the agenda that people feel strongly about, but please do be respectful to all parties in your deputations and in your conduct tonight. And with that, I'd like to welcome Sue Jane Gilliatt of Salter Point, who is speaking against the officer recommendation at item 10.3.3. Welcome, Ms Gilliatt.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors and city officers. I don't think you're all here to hear this deputation tonight, but bear with us. It is about display homes, so it is a different topic. I'm the chair of the Salter Point Community Group, and I don't think I need those. And I'm here to oppose the officer's recommendation on behalf of the SPCG, a recommendation for the modification of planning approval for a display home at 19 Redmond Street. The Salter Point Community Group opposes the officer's recommendations to approve the continued operation of display homes on Redmond at number 19 this time. That this home is adjacent to 3 other display homes has magnified the problem of negatively impacted amenity. After living with a construction site since 2015, locals have also wearied after 7 years waiting for this area to return to the residential zone it is meant to be. Our argument remains the same. The approval processes for these display homes have been skewed towards developers and their commercial interests rather than preserving amenity for ratepayers. The officer's recommendations to support the renewal of approvals for 4 in a row is at odds with the general objectives of Town Planning Scheme 6, which is about ensuring community aspirations and concerns are addressed and to safeguard and protect amenity for a quiet suburban street. Though that may be on the line, I might add. Just to give some context, approvals for 4 display homes were given in 2018 for 1 year from date of home completion. The completion of these homes, 4 of 27 in Salters Landing, at varying times, meant this temporary approval for 1 year started at different times for all 4. But 1 year came and went for each. While we locals had no idea of the rules, the companies were breaching them 3 days of the week for over a year, not only ignoring expiry dates, but also the other conditions of their approvals. That is, allowing prospective customers to park on the street, allowing and advertising for walk-in viewings rather than by appointment only, and placing advertising signage, both large and small, on the 4 properties as well as around the neighbourhood. These temporary approvals were forgotten about. Once frustrated residents, now tired of the comings and goings, discovered the anomalies, the developers were well past their use-by date, yet were given opportunities to apply for retrospective approvals. They are now carrying on till December 24-22 and may make fresh applications for 2023. The most recent officer's report on this states all existing conditions, etc., will continue to apply. Since February 22, when locals discovered the breaches and developers were reminded of the conditions of their approvals, breaches did reduce but have continued. In June 22, I sat here and said these conditions are not being adhered to, and it was a nonsense to continue the line that they ever would or can ever be adhered to. Just 3 weeks ago, we again reported that number 19, which is the topic of tonight's approval, Webb, Brown and Neves, the Webb, Brown and Neves agent, when approached, confirmed that he'd accepted walk-ins parked on the street. Cars were on the street and I approached him and asked about the appointments and the street parking. He said, "This is not in my control. There's nothing I can do about it. They came from next door." With respect, he knew of the conditions, but it was clear he had no intention of complying with them. If this approval is granted, may we respectively suggest the developer provides a security person to assist this agent to ensure activities on the street front are in accordance with their approvals. I might add it is not my wish or the wish of neighbours nearby to regularly confront people about their breaches of cost conditions, but we've been frustrated enough to do so, and why these unsatisfactory arrangements have been thrust, as a result of these unsatisfactory arrangements, kind of thrust upon ratepayers for rolling periods. We make the point that it is not good practice to approve 4 display homes in a row on a quiet suburban street. The impacts are cumulative. Display homes are not listed as a land use in the Town Planning Scheme 6. They are an odd exception, and although special temporary approval can be given, it is supposed to be limited. Rolling approvals, even if by default, should not occur. No matter that the rules seem to allow it, the decision to permit adjacent display homes to continue just doesn't pass the pub test for us. On a positive note, we appreciate the City has been listening to our concerns since February. Just quietly, they're probably quite sick of us by now. We note in the officer's report this time round that there is a change of content and tone, as well as a demonstration of much broader neighbour consultation than was ever conducted in 2018. There has been a significant increase in the City's compliance actions, and we understand that notices have been issued to the owners of the properties. We also understand that there is now a spreadsheet or a dashboard in place for monitoring temporary approvals. After many hours and a lot of effort on both the City's part and that of local residents, things have improved. Mostly. Given the recent decisions of Council for adjacent properties at 15 and 17 to approve until 24th, 22, 24th of December 22. We understand there is no appetite for disallowing this modification at number 19. While we are aware that the above will be viewed, or what I've said tonight will be viewed as irrelevant to the original or the individual development application, we do remain hopeful that any applications for further approval in 2023 will not be considered favourably. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms Gilliatt tonight? No. In that case, thank you again for your deputation.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to call Jonathan Lookman of Bateman, who is speaking for the officer recommendation at item 10.3.4. Welcome, Mr Lookman.
Thank you.
And I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly.
Close enough. It's close enough. Thank you, guys. So I'm here to, I'm just a humble innkeeper. I've got a property at 45 Mary Street that I want to convert one of the units into a short-term, short-stay accommodation. We tick all the boxes for the town planning scheme. We're near tourism areas of Como Beach and Perth Zoo. We're near economic activity areas of the Preston Street section. It's on a relatively busy street. It's not on the cul-de-sac or on the no-through road area. We're near public transport, and the property site itself has minimal facilities which can cause conflict with long-term residents. So there's no swimming pools, there's no gyms, there's no any of those sort of ancillary facilities that could cause conflict with long-term residents. So with short-term accommodation, Airbnbs are now a fact of life. People just don't want to live in motels and hotels anymore when they're holidaying. I run a relatively successful business in the Perth CBD. I run a backpackers. It's called Kangaroo Inn. It's won multiple awards with the Western Australian Tourism Awards multiple times. And we've found that there is a shift. There is a shift from hotel-style accommodation to ones that are more like homes. And I thank the City of South Perth for having this, their town planning scheme P350.18, which supports this type of business. So I was quite surprised at the number of rebuttals for my mini application. It's not a big development. It's simply a 2x1 unit complex. It's an existing unit. We're not making any structural changes to it. We're just simply changing it from what used to be a long-term to a short-term, medium-term stay proposal. So I was quite surprised by the rebuttals. And the main concern that I had with the people that had issues with the short-term was that they were concerned about the antisocial conflicts. As a side job, I also am a licensee of a property real estate agency. So I have plenty of hats. So what people don't realize is that if you have a long-term tenancies, it's very, very difficult to kick someone out for antisocial behavior. So if there's a party going on and people want to shut it down, or they want to evict the tenants, it's very, very difficult. Whereas if you're a short-term tenant, let's guess, I can call the police and the police will be there and evict the tenants under trespass laws. We have that right. But if it's a long-term tenant, they're protected under the Residential Tenancies Act, which means we cannot evict them, we cannot get rid of them easily. As a case in point, I also own another unit, a block of units in Leonara Street. I recently purchased it with an incoming tenant. Unbeknown to me, this tenant, a long-term tenant who is protected under the Residential Tenancies Act, was a drug dealer, was a repeat offender, and caused a lot of problems. He caused a lot of antisocial behaviors, unbeknownst to me, and caused a lot of grief to the surrounding neighbors. We could do nothing about it. We could do nothing. We can only apply to the magistrate. I applied to the magistrate. The first time, the magistrate refused to hear me because not appropriate notices or whatnot. Second time, she heard me, and we got him evicted. That's a 2-week process already. Then the guy refused to leave, and it took over a month for the bailiffs and all the process to get in. I took possession of the property in June, and it was only until, I think, end of August, September, that we were able to finally get rid of this tenant. So for people to say that short-term accommodation is a higher risk to the public compared to long-term tenants, that's false. That is totally false. So yeah, I think the council needs to approve sites like mine, which makes sense, whilst not approving those sites, which definitely will cause problems with people who are living with long-term tenants. So that's what I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your deputation.
Yes.
Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Lukeman today? Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Lukeman, for your presentation. What sort of controls do you suggest you can put in place to give, I guess, some comfort to adjoining residents that they won't be adversely impacted by the events you've just mentioned?
What type of adverse antisocial behaviour is that? So we're happy to give our contact details. So I run a backpackers, which is monitored 24 hours with night caretakers. I'm happy to give those phone numbers to him. And in my management proposal, I did say I've also run a licensed real estate agent, and my property manager can also be available at all times. So if there's an issue, also I'm available as well. So if there are any issues with respect to that, they can simply give us a call and we'll be on top of it.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Mr Lukeman, for your deputation. With regard to the officer's recommendation, there are 6 conditions attached to that. Are there any conditions that you consider too onerous or inappropriate?
Unfortunately, I haven't seen those conditions, sorry. I haven't received.
I imagine, well, you'd be able to certainly find them on the agenda to this meeting, Mr Lukeman.
I do apologise, yes. I'm not changed, so yeah. I was aware that the town planner was mentioning that they wanted to put a condition of 1 year proposal, I believe. Unfortunately, when I had a look at the agenda earlier this week, earlier on the weekend, it wasn't there out, so I wasn't aware, so I do apologise.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Cridland.
You've said that this is an appropriate location for short stay accommodation because it's near Preston Street, I think you said. Would you agree that the shopping area there in Preston Street is simply a local neighbourhood shopping area rather than a destination?
No, I would disagree with that. There are a couple of eateries around that area that people from outside the city of South Perth and outside the locality attend. The pub there is quite famous. There was a Malaysian restaurant there. I don't know if it's still there or not. That was quite famous. There's a coffee shop called, and it's an Indonesian one. I forgot the name, escapes me. Unfortunately, they had to temporarily close because from what I understand, there's a lack of hospitality staff. And I'm aware there were people from outside of the city of South Perth area coming specifically to that area. Furthermore, the shopping centre at IGA is a 24/7 shopping centre, a supermarket. That means it attracts people from outside the city of South Perth area, I would imagine, as well. Outside the immediate Preston Street precinct. I would imagine people from Curtin coming over there as well, which is, I believe, is outside the boundaries.
And now, would you agree that the location in Mary Street is a quiet residential area?
Quiet, okay. Mary Street is a relatively busy suburban street compared to other streets. It's because it's the way the flow of the neighborhood, there's always people walking by and always cars passing by. Have a look at the number of cars passing through Mary Street. It's one of the main conduits between Preston Street and further south in near the Canning Bridge area, where I think it's where Leonara Street and all that. People use Mary Street as a thoroughfare, because all the other ones, such as Robert Street, it crosses into a T-junction, whereas Mary Street is a thoroughfare.
Councillor Cridlin, you've still got no further questions? Councillors, any other questions for Mr Lukeman this evening? No. Thank you very much for your deputation.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Avalee Curtis of Como, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome, Ms Curtis.
Good evening, Mayor Milner, councillors, Mr Bradford and other City of South Perth staff. My name is Avalee Curtis and I am in Year 5 at Como Primary School. I have recently met Mayor Milner on a number of occasions whilst competing in school competitions in the City of South Perth. I represented my school in the Speak with Confidence competition, was awarded a commendation in the Philip Pendle Young Heritage Award, and awarded first place in the South Perth Young Writers Award. I would like to thank the City of South Perth for providing such wonderful opportunities. Mayor Milner, I am sure you will agree that I am a young member of this community who values learning and makes the most of every opportunity. I am also a swimmer. I love swimming. I train 3 times a week so that I can maintain my fitness throughout the winter season, ready for the summer competitions. I have many friends who also do the same. Did you know that currently we train in an outdoor pool at Wesley College during the winter season? Yes, the freezing cold outdoor pool, come rain, hail or shine. Yes, it may be slightly heated, but let me tell you that getting out of that somewhat lukewarm pool into the icy wind is downright awful. So much so that unfortunately many of my friends and myself have opted out of swimming during this winter season, as it is, if the truth be told, rather unpleasant and miserable swimming in the rain and against the wind. Whilst I recognise that there are pools in neighbouring suburbs, the reality is that during the school week, most training sessions for children occur straight after school because we need early nights. Therefore, travelling outside our area is time restrictive as well as incredibly inconvenient for my family, who need to ferry around more than just myself. And can you just imagine the peak hour traffic we would endure on a school night? When it comes to tryouts and training for swimming carnivals as a school team, it is virtually impossible because we do not have a pool in close proximity to access. I feel this is of a great disadvantage to the children in our area. And then, let me introduce you to school swimming lessons. We, the children of the City of South Perth, are forced to waste valuable learning time travelling on a bus to access a pool for swimming lessons. Lining up for buses to ferry us across the town to have swimming lessons and then back to school, especially when we are wet during the cold winter, is just plain awful. Do you know that in Term 2, our school travelled to an aquatic centre that was available, able to host our student numbers, and close by. And the time spent travelling to and from the centre was longer than the actual swimming lesson. I also play competitive netball with my friends. Again, the children of the City of South Perth are let down by a lack of amenities. We need to play sports out of our area because the city of South Perth does not even have sporting and recreational facilities for us to play netball. My friends from Como, Collier, Kensington, South Perth, St Pius and St Clumbus are all required to travel outside our own council area to play netball. The federal and state government are constantly bombarding us with the very clear message about the importance of fitness and community engagement. But unfortunately, I feel this is a message that seems to be of very little value to our councillors, denying the children of South Perth the opportunity to act, belong, commit. By voting to stop the RAF, you are denying us, the children of this community, the opportunity to have access to a facility which enables us to be fit, to be healthy, to exercise, to learn what it means to be part of a team. But most of all, you have denied us of a sense of belonging in our own community. I would like to ask those councillors who voted against the RAF to ponder my questions. I ask you, councillors, do you value me? Do you value me as a learner, as an athlete, as a member of this community? By stopping the RAF, your message to the children in this community is a great, big no. I implore you to support children like me, to be the best that we can be. Please, look to the future. Plan for the future, because I am the future, because we are the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that deputation, Ms Curtis, and I can see that speak with confidence, commendation was clearly very well deserved. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms Curtis this evening? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And thank you, Ms Curtis, for your very informative and valuable input and deputation this evening. I'm just wondering where, you did mention something about councillors voting to stop the RAF. I'm just wondering where you got that information from, or why you've got the perception that councillors are trying to or have voted to stop the RAF, please.
Because the children of this community, but not just the children, the adults also need a place for the community to come together and to exercise and be healthy. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any further questions for Ms Curtis this evening? No. Thank you again for your deputation. I'd now like to invite Mr Adrian MacDonald of South Perth, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome, Mr MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. How do you follow an act like that? No, well said. I'm speaking against the proposed motion because I believe that it's inappropriate and unnecessary, given the extensive negotiations already undertaken by the city in relation to the RAF project. And I believe it's likely to jeopardise future negotiations between the city and the state government on other projects that may come up. I'm confused in wondering what is Councillor Choi's reason for tabling this proposed motion. What is expected to be achieved if this motion is successful? Is this simply an attempt by Councillor Choi to demonstrate that she is standing by the statement she made in her 2021 campaign material, which said that she, quote, supports a financially responsible, sustainable recreation and aquatic facility? Anyone reading the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of the 28th of June 2022, specifically item 10.3.1 regarding the provision of project management for the recreation and aquatic facility, might consider Councillor Choi's actions at that meeting directly contradicted what she said in her election campaign. Let me remind everyone present that the failure to appoint a suitably qualified and independent project manager to the RAF project by 1 July 2022 meant that the city effectively forfeited the $20 million grant towards the cost of this project that was promised by the federal government in the lead up to the 2019 federal election. And this, I think, answers the question that you posed to the previous speaker, Councillor Choi. By voting against the appointment or the appointing of a project manager on the 28th of June, Councillors Choi, Manolis, Brenda Abrandis, Nevard and D'Souza effectively spelt the end of the RAF project for the foreseeable future. It was one of the requirements of milestone 2 of the FFA that a suitably qualified independent project manager be appointed by 1 July 2022. And at that 28th of June meeting, it had been proposed that, in fact, the city appoint or accept a tender submitted by Donald Cunt Watts Cork Proprietary Limited for the provision of recreation and aquatic facility management for this project. And so that would have effectively met that milestone and ensured that the first tranche of $7 million of the proposed $20 million, as I understand it, would have been forthcoming and the project could have proceeded. I believe I firmly believe that this motion by Councillor Choi, if passed, will further adversely impact the reputation and integrity of the City of South Perth and its representatives. And like the previous speaker, speaking on behalf of the youth of the City of South Perth, I am a member of a committee of an organisation that provides exercise for elderly people, or shall we say people over 50 or 60 years of age, many of whom have experienced having knee replacements, hip replacements, and the benefit that these people can gain from having an accessible aquatic centre where they can enjoy hydrotherapy would be of great benefit. So it's not only going to be beneficial to the youth of this city, but certainly to the older members of the community as well. And therefore I urge the councillors to vote against the proposed motion.
Thank you, Mr MacDonald. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr MacDonald this evening? Councillor Nevard.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr MacDonald. I was just wondering why you think that the state or Commonwealth would want to somehow be nasty or wreak revenge in the face of a project's difficulty.
I don't quite get your meaning. Do you think that this proposed motion, the idea of writing to the state and/or federal government and requiring replies within the period of 1 month, you don't see that as rather demeaning or insulting?
No, I don't.
Well,
And that's
I mean,
because,
Councillor Navard, this is not a forum for debate
you're
with
right.
deputies. You can ask questions, but not debate.
No, I don't.
Councillors, any further questions for Mr McDonald this evening? No. Thank you for your deputation, Mr McDonald.
Thank you,
Oh,
Mr.
wait,
Mayor.
sorry, I apologise. Councillor Brenda Brandis has his hand up. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McDonald, for your deputation this evening. In your opening statements, you referred to extensive negotiations undertaken by the city at this point in time. Can you just share what those extensive negotiations are with regard to this RAF?
Well, I think it's on a matter of public record that the executive of the City of South Perth, not just the current chief executive officer, but his predecessor, have had many discussions with both the state and federal representatives regarding this project. It's been under discussion since, as I understand it, about 2015, so nearly 7 years, and in that period of time, as I understand it, but I'm sure that Mr. Bradford, the CEO, can confirm or deny that, but I'm sure that there's been extensive negotiations and discussions.
Could you allude to any specific negotiations that you're referring to?
I'm going to cut that question off. That's not really relevant to the matter under discussion, and the agenda is quite clear. Are there any other questions for Mr McDonald this evening? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with regard to your statement on the first tranche of funding of the $7 million, could I just ask if you confirmed that number?
Councillor Brenda Brandis, I'm not going to allow that. That's not a relevant matter to be putting to deputies. Are there any questions for Mr McDonald that relate to his actual deputation? No. Thank you very much for your deputation, Mr McDonald. I'd now like to invite Mrs Cindy Bateman of Salter Point, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation on item 12.1. And welcome, Ms Bateman.
Good evening, Council, and thank you very much for this opportunity. So my name is Cindy Bateman. I am the President of the Manning Primary School, PNC, and I'm here today to represent a large footprint in my community who are actually very much in favour of the recreation and aquatic facility. And that information is important because I am actually speaking against the motion of 12.1 put forward by Councillor Mary Choi. To that end, my sentiments do very much reflect Mr McDonald's. The notice of motion I found to be commanding in nature, bordering on disrespectful towards the CEO, who does not require authorisation with his engagements with the government and various representatives. As delivered, I don't believe the motion that it fosters a trusting relationship with the state government, and it may subsequently erode the likelihood of future funding partnerships because it's very demanding. It's a counterproductive approach that undermines progress to date by the CEO and the state government engagements in relation to potential funding commitments for the RAF. And that information is all out there. I won't require cross-examination on that. And it's self-righteous, given the previous decision by many councillors, 5 of the 9 of you, not to appoint the project manager in order to meet that key milestone of to secure federal funding. And I'm not here to debate that. It's just extremely concerning that we would put forward a motion of this nature when we've not supported it from the federal funding perspective. So in closing, any hindrance to a fair and equitable process of due diligence to review the viability of the RAF, it's premature. And given that it will benefit every generation within our community, there is an overwhelming support for it. And I would like that to be considered in its entirety in both state and federal engagements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Bateman. Councillors, any questions for Ms Bateman this evening? No. Thank you very much for your deputation. I'd now like to invite Ms Rebecca Goodacre of Waterford, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome, Ms Goodacre.
I came dressed in roll for the Aquatic Centre. I am also on the PNC for Manning Primary School. I'm the secretary there and I'm a mother of two. I'm also a life coach and a teacher. And I really feel strongly about having this centre, so much that I'm getting political. That's really not normally me. So why I'm here tonight is really to oppose the letter that's been requested in 12.1 to be sent from the CEO. And the reason I'm doing that is because I do also want to echo what Cindy said, so I'm not going to repeat everything that she said, and Mr. McDonald, and because I value Miss Curtis and her future, and also my children's future. So, yeah, all I'd like to say is I'd like to echo the fact that I feel that that will maybe cause some sticky points for the state between our council and the state, and that could impact not only our RAF, but it could impact other relationships that we may have with the state. So that's all I'd like to say to you tonight, but I do feel strongly, and that's why I'm here, being a political person, which is normally not my thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms Goodacre. Just before you go, I will ask if any of the councillors have any questions for you in relation to your deputation. Councillors? That's a no. I could have just let you go. Oh, wait. Councillor Navard.
Why do you think the RAF would be cancelled by sending a letter to the state government, given that workers of the city know how to write polite letters and they will never dream of writing a rude letter of demand?
Well, I don't see it as a rude letter, but I'm thinking if the state do look back at the steps that have been taken already towards the RAF and not following through on some of the things that they were meant to follow through on, which put them in breach of accessing any other funding, I feel that that may make us look not particularly great, well, not great. So I'm feeling if we're going to be putting and asking and requesting, then they might look back and say, well, hang on. Why have you not done X, Y, and Z?
Thank you, Ms Goodacre. Councillors, any further questions for Ms Goodacre this evening? Councillor Navard, you still have your light on. Was that intentional?
Sorry.
No. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms Goodacre. I'd now like to invite Ms Lorna Boyes of Manning, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome, Ms Boyes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm here also as a parent of young children in the community, and I'm really baffled by this notice of motion. I'm baffled by the fact that we're here debating whether we should send demanding and aggressive letters to the state government. May they be politely worded. I'm sure the message will get through that we're demanding that the state government respond to us within 30 days and answer all of our questions and do a range of other things. I'm really baffled that we are considering entering into such correspondence when the city has deliberately put itself in breach of the existing federal funding agreement that we already have, where the city has twice refused to take an administrative step of appointing a project manager that had nil financial exposure for the city, that would have unlocked $7 million in federal funding that we have already committed to, that would jeopardise the full $20 million of federal funding that we are currently entitled to. I'm really confused as to why, with that background, we would now feel in any position to be demanding that the state government lists all of its reasons and deliberations and gets back to us on our funding application within 30 days. That just makes no sense to me at all. I would have thought that if the council wants to put the city in the best position to secure that state government funding, that it would be really focused on getting the federal funding back on track, on honouring its existing commitments to the funding we already have, and in doing so demonstrate to the state government that we're committed to this project, that we're prepared to honour our commitments, that we're prepared to progress diligently through the agreed project development pathway. And in doing that, that the state government could rely on our city to do the same if it were to dip into its coffers and provide more funding for this project. Progressing through those further steps of planning and design under the federal agreement would also give the state government more information to inform its own decision-making processes when it's considering our funding application. The community expects the council to serve its best interests by honouring and protecting the existing funding that we already have from the federal government, and by putting the CEO in the best possible position to negotiate with the state about further funding. The current motion undermines that process. It undermines the ability and interferes with the CEO's ability to get on and do his job. What we need to do is arm the CEO and the administration with the confidence that it needs to engage with the state government to try and get this additional funding back on track. That's all.
Thank you very much for your deputation. Councillors, any questions for Ms Boys this evening? No questions? Thank you very much for your deputation. I'd now like to invite Mr George Watts of Carrawarra, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation on item 12.1. And welcome, Mr Watts.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thomas Paine, a figure out of the time of America's Revolution, once said, "Lead, follow, or get out of the way." Councillors, you've had the trust of residents of the City of South Perth put into your hands to lead our community and make decisions for the betterment of our area. Aquatic and recreation facilities are sadly lacking in our area and have been identified as a need to be fulfilled. The RAF project goes a long way to fulfilling these needs in a way that is financially responsible and sustainable. The Council previously voted to not appoint a project manager, deliberately breaching the federal funding agreement, putting $20 million at risk. In the words of the Mayor, this sent a terrible signal to a wide range of stakeholders, including federal government, state government, and the community you serve. The motion being put forward by Councillor Mary Choi is an interesting one, in that on one hand, it very clearly indicates that she has belief in the business case and financial implications of the project, with the main piece of the puzzle left being securing the necessary funding from state government. Having Mary's leadership and clear support for the RAF and the business case is fantastic, as there has been much noise and misinformation in the contrary to the independently reviewed financial implications voiced by vocal minorities, which, on face value, appear to have sway over some councillors' thoughts on this. However, whilst this leadership from Councillor Choi is commendable, I would urge the councillor to, in this instance, follow the recommendations of the officer's report. The reasoning for this is simple. The administration have been working hard lobbying state government. the state government are obviously crucial to the success of the project, and what should be known to anyone, they operate at their own pace and agenda. Currently, the state government are faced with terrible signalling by the council, who have also put both our stakeholders, namely the federal government and the community, offside. This would be greatly assisted by stepping back on previous decisions by council and appoint a project manager to ensure that the $20 million of federal funding remains secured. In fact, the timing of this motion, when the community's petition in relation to this very decision is tabled in 1 week's time, provides further terrible signalling to one of the key stakeholders, the community, and is actually disrespectful of the community. Noting that respect is one of the city's values, it is perhaps time that the community is shown some respect when it comes to this project. To give the administration the best chance to secure the required funding commitment, withdraw this motion. The questioning letters proposed are inconsequential and nothing but a distraction, with the only path the council can make to assist this process to ensure that all requirements of the federal funding are met. So, back to my original quote. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. Option A, lead. Option B, follow. Option C, get out of the way. In deciding to not appoint a project manager, council have clearly not chosen option A, lead. I urge you to choose option B at next week's meeting and follow the officer's recommendation, ideally by withdrawing the motion. If neither of these options suit, then I'm confident the community will be more than happy to help you choose option C and vote. As in the words of Councillor Choi's own election campaign, change doesn't happen if nothing changes. Make your vote count. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr Watts. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Watts this evening? Councillor Navard.
Mr Watts, do you think it's respectful to speak towards Councillor Choi in that fashion?
I believe...
Councillor Navard, I don't think that's a question we can be asking of deputies, with all due respect.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Navard, I'm talking. That's not an appropriate question.
I'm happy to answer if it helps.
No, not necessary, Mr Watts. Councillors, any questions for Mr Watts? No. Thank you for your deputation, Mr Watts. I'd now like to invite Mr Bob Mitchell of South Perth, who is speaking for the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1.
Thank you, Mayor Milner. I'm speaking for the notice of motion with the idea of really expediting the process. I am amazed at the number of speakers that have been against the notice of motion, because I think that they're more debating the total project rather than the reason for trying to get state government to address the issue of are they going to support the project. So please keep that in mind. The motion really relates to 3 letters being sent, and all of them can be worded in a polite way and request that a response be received by such and such a date, or within 1 month of receival. To me, that's not offensive or demanding. It's simply an expectation, and if it can't be met, then so be it. It can't be met. The process of negotiation for the $20 million for the recreation aquatic facility with the state government has been protracted. In part, it is likely that the business case is, in a way, at the stage where it has been found to be not financially sound, allowing for the costs of construction and building supply shortages and rising inflation. And the total cost is going to be much more than the original 80 million if it's kept in its same form, more likely 110 to 130 million. However, at the meeting of 28th of June, which we've talked about before, in answer to a question, the reporting officer for the City of South Perth was adamant that the RAF remains an $80 million project. To me, that seemed a little bit inflexible, and I asked a question and was surprised at the answer that surely there must be some risk management brought into this. Now, at that same meeting, the resolution by the City of South Perth to not support the appointment of a project manager, it was a definite decision by council. It's not just a feeling, it was a definite decision. And at that council meeting, I feel there was extreme pressure on individual councillors. And the courage of the 5 councillors to withstand that extreme pressure is to be commended. I will not talk to the third item that I have on a handout because I've been advised by the Mayor it's inappropriate to do so. Probably much of the series of problems that the RAF has faced is derived going way back, as Mr McDonald said, 2015 they talked about it, not necessarily at that site, but in 2018 we were given our first view at the public consultation of things like a pie chart that showed 20 million Commonwealth, 20 million state government, 20 million council, 20 million other stakeholders. That was almost a fait accompli at the first vision of it. Now, early involvement of stakeholders and genuine early consultation are the keys to gaining government support. There are so many models that relate to that could be found in the literature. Early involvement and genuine consultation. Certainly, I've raised some practical concerns in relation to the RAF's revised golf course layout, and I mentioned the Curtin Walk as an example where it's expected that thousands of students are going to come across from Curtin and use the facility of the RAF right through the middle of the 9 holes of the Pines. And I've talked about the poor thinking of that and the consequences for safety, not only just for being hit with a golf ball, but walking through there, young ladies in the dusk, not safe. I don't know how that would be policed. And yet the latest available plans that go back only 1 year that I've seen continue to have a great big arrow coming from Curtin all the way through to the RAF. I would hope that someone is actually addressing those issues. I haven't seen any evidence of it. So perhaps the state government at that very first public information session also felt that it had not been properly consulted. Because as I say, here was a fait accompli. Commonwealth money, state money, etc. There was an expectation that, and this may well have contributed to the current delay in the state government's response for the $20 million contribution. Now, the comments on item 12.1 of the notice of motion give a lot of reasons as to why you would prefer that the motion doesn't proceed. But they seem to say the CEO, the Mayor and other City of South Perth staff have a preferred method of approaching the state government. Councillors do not preempt and do not set a proposed program timetable. It seems to be it's our way is best. Now, I and many other South Perth residents believe the motion aims to ensure the processes with the Minister for Sport and Recreation, and he holds many other important ministries, are timely and aim for a resolution soon. December of this year is not unreasonable to think that for something that's been on the books, gone through many iterations, that we can't at least get the state government to give a response to something that they received, I'm told, in October 2021. That's 11 months ago, we're asking them for a response. I urge councillors to vote in favour of this motion because I think it expedites the whole process and should not offend anyone in the state government unless they've got a very thin skin.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr Mitchell. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr Mitchell about his deputation? Councillor Cridland.
Mr Mitchell, this motion effectively tells the CEO to write 3 letters, one of which is to our local Member of Parliament to find out whether or not he supports the RAF. Are you aware that our local Member of Parliament, Mr Jeff Baker, has already told councillors that he firmly supports the RAF?
I would think that's fair to also ask him in writing. To ask him in writing, he may not wish to give an answer in writing, but that's up to him. The letter can be sent.
Do you think it's going to affect the relationship between the city and Mr Baker if we have to write to him to ask him what he has already told the councillors?
I believe that writing a letter, it is then up to the person, the recipient of that letter, as to what answer they give, but it's trying to at least give a timetable to making some feedback from the members of the state government that have important issues about this, to be able to say, these are my views, and they may not completely answer everything that is asked in the letter, but they nevertheless at least have an opportunity to put in writing what they have said in public.
Any further questions for Mr Mitchell, councillors? No. Thank you for your deputation, Mr Mitchell.
Thank you.
I'd now like to invite Ms Cecilia Brooke of South Perth, who is speaking for the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome, Ms Brooke.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I, Cecilia Brooke, represent the City of South Perth Residents Association Incorporated. We support the motion at agenda item 12.1 as tabled by Councillor Mary Choi. At the June 2022 Ordinary Council meeting, a majority of councillors, including Councillor Choi, were astute enough to understand the current economic situation and the fragile cost and revenue assumptions of the RAF. They demonstrated their integrity and their fortitude. They questioned the continuation of spending money on the RAF prior to the guarantee of additional and necessary state government and private equity funding and the quality of the business case, and therefore did not support the appointment of a project manager. It is important to note that at no point did this decision equate to killing off the RAF. Unfortunately, since this vote, Councillor Choi and the other 4 councillors who made a majority decision have been the target of significant and often misinformed abuse from some ratepayers, former and current councillors, and vocal community identities. One current councillor recorded a media interview condemning the decision to hold back on the appointment.
Ms Brooke, can we keep the deputation on the notice of motion, please?
I can't finish that sentence because it's all part of it.
Then perhaps move on to the next sentence.
We are very concerned about this divisiveness in the council and the undermining conduct from within our elected councillors. Consequently, we present a series of observations in the form of a brief 5-point timeline to support Councillor Choi's motion at agenda item 12.1 to clarify state government funding for the RAF and to request an independent review of the business case. Timeline. 1. At the October 2018 Ordinary Council meeting, Council resolved to commence formal engagement with the state government to gauge their interest, support and involvement in a regional scale, multi-use leisure and aquatic facility located within the city. 2. At the September 2019 Ordinary Council meeting, Council resolved for the Chief Executive Officer to seek external funding support for the RAF, with the officer's report outlining in the background section to include partnerships with state stakeholders. 3. At the March 2021 Special Council meeting, Council endorsed the RAF business plan to allow, amongst other things, progression of more active discussions with and further formal approaches to the state government, noting that progress made to seek funding. This review identified a number of cautions that would be required should the project progress, but essentially green-lighted the seeking of the funds from the state government. 4. Following a council resolution at the August 2021 Ordinary Council meeting, the City submitted a formal funding proposal, also known as the Investment Business Case or Treasury Business Case, to Minister Booty, then Minister for Finance, Land, Sports and Recreation, citizenship and multicultural interests. In October 2021, the Minister acknowledged receipt of the funding proposal. 5. Having had no funding secured from any public or private source after 4 years of lobbying, a number of councillors in December 2021 and June 2022 quite rightly believed that the appointment of a project manager was premature. Such an appointment would suggest a certainty of outcome to residents that, despite being reinforced in the city's publication, currently has no certainty of outcome without the guarantee of additional and necessary funding. This brings us back to Councillor Choi's motion aimed at securing a funding commitment of $20 million from the state government and requesting an independent assessment of the business case in the current context. The state funding is to be added to the $20 million from the federal government, $20 million allocated from the city revenue, and the potential of $20 million to be sourced from a private equity partner. Despite the long list of actions on the part of the CEO outlined in the officer comment on this motion of the council agenda, there has been a woeful lack of success in securing $20 million from the state government or $20 million from a private equity partner. Without this funding, there can be no project and certainly no tangible reason why the council should appoint a project manager. One could suggest no tangible reason to continue spending on the project at all. The city has already spent at least $1.5 billion of ratepayers' money between October 2018 and September 2022. You might recall that the city sought a further $1 million from ratepayers in the budget late last year, but you, our elected councillors, refused that request. Councillor Mary Choi's motion requesting an independent assessment of the business case in the current context should also be undertaken as soon as feasible. Councillors, the RAF has been a project of the city for over 4 years. That's plenty of time to make a pitch to private enterprise about the profitable returns available from a $20 million investment in a RAF in South Perth. Curtin University appeared to be interested, possibly for exclusive rather than public use space expected by many ratepayers, and a couple of branches of state government expressed a desire for office and ancillary space in a new building. However, none of these deals has been closed and no firm funding is available. Given the city's lack of success after 4 years to bid to council any financial commitment other than the original federal contribution, it is no wonder council needs to make a more active role in seeking clarity, transparency and accountability to the City of South Perth community. We thank Councillor Choi for her motion, respectfully requesting surety of funding from our state government and an independent assessment of the business case. Even if this funding is forthcoming, the following basic project management questions remain. 1, what must the city achieve to determine whether the RAF proceeds or not? 2, when will such milestones be achieved? 3, what is the cost expected at each of these milestones? If we could see the funding story improving along with an independent assessment of the business case in keeping with current inflation and economic conditions, the City of South Perth Residents Association would have much greater confidence in the financial viability of the city's RAF proposal and fewer concerns regarding the potential cost impost of the RAF on the ratepayers of the City of South Perth. We support Councillor Mary Choi's motion. We urge the city to sort out the funding for the RAF. We support the need for an appropriate independent assessment of the business case. We do not support the RAF in its current form. And we do look forward to the day when there is a certainty and that a robust business case such as the residents of the City of South Perth can enjoy these facilities of a RAF. After listening to a lot of people here tonight and everyone talking about having a swimming pool, this has been going on since 2015, as another speaker said. If the city had gone ahead with the $20 million from the federal government in 2018, the pool could have been built for $20 million then, and people would have had a pool. They wouldn't have had all the rest of the things in a RAF, but everyone seems to want a pool. And I'd like them to realise that we're not against a pool at all. We're wanting a better business case and finances secured. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, Ms Brooke. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms Brooke this evening? Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Not a question, actually, but I know the standing orders don't apply here, but I mean, I think equal fairness,
Councillor Russell, there is only an opportunity to ask questions of the deputies.
I understand that, but may I have indulgence to complete what I'm about to say?
Make it brief, please.
Okay, look, I think equal fairness should be applied. We've had one deputation sort of get out of the way for a councillor, and then we've had...
Okay, Councillor Russell, no, I'm not allowing you to continue with that. Thank you for your deputation, Ms Brooke. I'd now like to invite Ms Sane Richter of Manning, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation on item 12.1.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors and city administration staff. I represent myself and my young family as a long-term resident who generally cares for and believes South Perth is a world-class local city. I'm a passionate and experienced senior urban designer with knowledge in architecture, design, planning and development at local and state level. It is rare for councillors to consider projects like the recreation aquatic facility. It's once in a lifetime opportunity to deliver an essential piece of community infrastructure on this scale, complexity and quality. The RAF presents an enormous benefit to the community, a comprehensive, inclusive and convenient health and social benefit at no cost to the ratepayer. I realise there's a tsunami of hardworking residents, families and kids waiting for this facility. They're time poor, working full time, caring for dependents and trying to get ahead. They have good faith in the City of South Perth administration and its councillors. They live here because they love it. Residents read updates on the South Perth Peninsula snapshot and feel informed that the RAF is going ahead. To them, it will save thousands of kilometres annually, driving to other distant recreation facilities, Coburn Arc, BD Park, Vic Park, Melville, Riverton, Cannington, any other local government's got one because they can do it, costing them their own time while congesting local roads, polluting the environment and changing the climate while they try and get healthy. Collectively, millions of kilometres, travelling with big, heavy SUVs and four-wheel drives, ferrying children to facilities other local governments. All this comes at expense. A walkable, high amenity South Perth can reduce the need for multi-car households. It increases incidental spend at local businesses. And sorry, I'll stop there. It increases incidental spend in the local businesses having a local RAF. There's the following relevant documents are guiding council's decisions for the RAF: the 2021 to 2031 Community Strategic Plan, the Community Recreation Facility Plan, 2019 to 2033, the Local Planning Strategy. All of these documents are formalising with genuine ongoing consultations with community and communications with all residents. They represent the fairest, broadest and most comprehensive community aspirations and needs. The objectives and commitments found within these are clear so that councillors can participate effectively to meet their decision-making obligations. Recently, at the 28th of June council meeting, this year Councillor Choi and 4 others voted against continue to appoint a project manager, which obviously puts the legal requirement for the binding agreement for $20 million of federal funding committed to the project. Mayor Milner pleaded with councillors in a well-articulated opening address on the matter. It was clear that appointing the project manager does not commit us to building the RAF, nor does it cost any money to the ratepayer, and more than a decision would otherwise be viewed as clandestine in nature, attracting scrutiny and perceived poorly by the community and funding partners. It risks the reputational damage to the administration. Voting in favour to appoint a project manager would simply enable the next phase of the more detailed business case, continued project investigations and negotiations with the state, whoever you want, project partners, around the options the RAF would be explored. Since voting not to secure the $20 million of federal funding in June, Councillor Choi appears to be making some effort to backflip the position. I am not sure what has led to the motion, but I'm left confused as the overall position is worse and potentially much worse. There's $20 million missing, for which the state government may not so willingly also contribute toward. The worst part is that $20 million was there at no cost to the residents. It was waiting. It was secured in a legally binding agreement. It was investing in our community, the people, what they want. To me, this was one of the financially most tragic decisions done without the community consultation and without good transparency. I feel that we haven't been engaged, the community. I ran a brief, unbiased poll. It's obviously unverified on the City of South Perth community Facebook page. And 95% of the near 400 online votes came in favour of an RAF. This is consistent with the hundreds of residents I have spoken to while engaging with Petition. Simply, the rate of support for the RAF is very high, and there is also interest in support from neighbouring local governments and residents. Councillors are elected to represent the community views. I appreciate that councillors may get engaged frequently on many issues, and I have no doubt that the RAF will not be appreciated by everyone, and there are people in the community that simply don't want it. I'm not sure that the letters of demand or these timeframes in the state are a good idea. It's irregular in practice, it's ad hoc approach, it's non-conforming with our legal position with the 20 million. It's not it's not tactful in its timing because we're out of the legal binding agreement timeframes of the federal funding. I don't believe these are conducive to good business, partnerships and negotiations, this position we find ourselves. And lastly, I just ask councillors, when I did hear about some of these things, I considered the code of conduct. I know that we have a high regard for respectful and polite debate. I agree it's important. We must maintain respect and care for each other, regardless of an individual's position or view. However, the code of conduct does require us to conduct our positions with integrity and accountability. I question whether council is making informed decisions with regard to the RAF, particularly when there's no evidence of information being provided with their speculations, such as significant cost escalations, the rate rises being associated with the RAF, and the contrary to the business case. Particular attention needs to be paid to these code of conduct requirements when making decisions, especially if councils are going to use unique, time-specific market volatilities, such as global economic stimulus activity in response under emergency powers from a COVID-19 pandemic. That's probably behind us now. While supply issues and workers and material shortages result in some project cost escalations around the world, it was relatively temporary. We are now seeing a normalising, downward trends in a number of construction costs and easing of supply chains. Using this justification against the RAF, when clearly the project is many years away from the final version, only goes to show, in my eyes, that there is some sort of undermining of the project potentially occurring with data that's made relevantly available. While the next challenge for the project may be some inflationary pressures, that needs to be written out too. I urge councillors not to use the challenges as excuses to not support the view of the broader community they represent. Councillors need to find a workable way forward with what they have, and they will need to think laterally, participate constructively and collaboratively. Councillors will need to instruct the administration fairly and with reason and in line with integrity and accountability code of conduct expected. I leave you with my lasting thoughts. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity for councillors to leave a lasting legacy for this community to enjoy. It will form a big part of our rich history and will be central to many bonding neighbours and future friends. The RAF will become an important part of the urban and social fabric that will make South Perth an even more attractive place to live, learn and invest in. I urge you to give the RAF the very best chance it can have. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Rector. Councillors, do we have any questions? No. Thank you very much for your deputation. And to everyone in the room, I will echo Mr. Rector's sentiment about being respectful of others, even when you don't agree with their view. If we can play the issue, please. I'd now like to invite Mary Claire Andrews of Como, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation at item 12.1. Welcome, Ms. Andrews.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I believe that the motion should fail My reasons for this belief are that the defeat of the motion by Councillor Choi and others to appoint a project manager puts the $20 million from the federal government in jeopardy, as appointment of the PM is a requirement of receiving these funds. Many others have said that. I just wish to reiterate it. The project manager and the resulting report to Council are integral to Council being able to make an informed and transparent decision on whether the RAF should proceed. A firm funding allocation by the state government at this stage is not integral to that process. It's getting the money out of the federal government that is integral, and we've put that at risk by virtue of the decision not to appoint the project manager at the June meeting. Approving the appointment of the PM in no way commits the city to proceeding with the RAF. It's a step in the process, an essential step in the process. This motion tonight is, to me, neither logical nor necessary at this stage of the process. From what I have read, and I admit to being a bit late to the party on this one, the city appears to be holding regular, ongoing meetings with the relevant state government players and should be allowed to continue that process without interference. That's what the city admin staff do, and I believe that the motion tonight is unnecessary interference. Further to that, I believe that the motion is ill-timed, given that I understand there is a forthcoming meeting between the state government and city officers. As noted, it seems to me that it is possible to construe from the recent actions by Councillor Choi and others, namely not to appoint a project manager, and now this motion, that there is perhaps a covert attempt by several councillors.
I'm going to interrupt you there, Ms Andrews. I'm not going to allow any reflection on adverse motives on the part of any of my councillors.
Apologies for that. I believe this motion should fail. I guess and I also believe that the motion to appoint a project manager should be brought before council again, and it should be appointed. Otherwise, I guess the residents of South Perth need to know quite clearly from the mayor what's happening with the RAF proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms Andrews this evening? That's a no. Thank you for your deputation.
Thank you.
And I'd now like to invite Mr Adam Lucas of South Perth, who is speaking against the notice of motion recommendation on item 12.1. Welcome, Mr Lucas.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. By way of background, I'm an Olympic swimmer, competed for Australia at the 2004 Athens Olympics, and I've got 2 young children who live in the city of South Perth for the last 10 years. I also run the Australian office for a Norwegian investment bank and have quite a bit of experience with companies who've been able to secure close to $500 million worth of government financing. Securing government financing is a delicate process. It requires patience, continual lobbying, and dialogue with the appropriate government representatives. The approach detailed in agenda item 12.1 by the notice of motion by Councillor Mary Choi raises some issues which I'd like to discuss here tonight. In particular, the notice of motion 1D, 2B and 3B, which demand the Government Minister Honourable David Templeman, South Perth member Geoffrey Baker and WA Department of Treasury to provide written responses within 1 month of receipt of the letter to these representatives. I mean, demanding government responses in a set timeframe is an extremely aggressive approach. This would be okay if dealing with the private sector, saying that I'm very used to working investment banking, but ultimately governments will dictate the timing and the terms of commitment of financing. This proposed motion, in particular 1D, 2B and 3B, could potentially put the government offside and jeopardise government support for the RAF. The RAF will have a huge community benefit for the city of South Perth, covering all age groups, from juniors through to seniors. It will be a facility for all residents of South Perth. As we become a more digitalised community with increasing amount in front of screen time, our social interaction is being reduced by every day. A modern recreation facility will increase the social interaction between members of this community, and this will have a huge benefit for the mental health of community members as well. Convenience is also a massive factor for people exercising. Currently, there is no modern aquatic and recreation facilities in the city of South Perth. And I have to admit, hearing Ms. Curtis speak before, that's an absolute tragedy. We have young children who aren't even swimming during winter because this affluent city of South Perth doesn't have the modern facilities available for these children to be able to pursue their swimming during the winter season. By having a modern aquatic and recreation facility in this city, it will lead to more members of the community exercising, becoming healthier, also support individuals meeting other members of the community and creating local community friendships. The South Perth community deserves a modern recreation aquatic facility. The council should be doing everything in its power to pursue state government funding through the appropriate channels and dialogue. I believe the council should carefully consider their approach and strategy with the state government to ensure any actions or demands do not jeopardise the state or federal funding for this project. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your deputation, Mr Lucas. Councillors, any questions for Mr Lucas this evening? That's a no. Thank you very much. So that concludes item 8.3, which is deputations. We now move on to item 10, which is the draft September reports. And I now hand you over to the Chief Executive Officer, Mr Mike Bradford, to take you through the balance of the draft September reports.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.1.1 is Tender 6 of 2022, provision of James Miller Oval floodlighting upgrade. This report considers submissions received from the advertising of Tender 6 of 22 for the James Miller Oval floodlighting upgrade. The report outlines the assessment process during the used during the evaluation of tenders and recommends approval of a tender that provides the best value of money and level of service to the city. I'd emphasise there's actually a confidential attachment to this report as well.
Councillors, do we have any questions for the administration on this item? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just note on page 8 of the officer's comments under financial implications, the forecast project cost is within the city's budget allocation. I'm just wondering if contingency and escalation cost, if any, are also covered in the annual budget allocations for this project, please.
Mr Atwell.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Choi, for the question. So escalation is already built into the price because it's a lump sum contract offer. There is a contingency of 7% on the project at this time in the budget.
Thank you, Mr Atwell. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was looking, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but was schedule considered in the tender assessment?
Mr Atwell?
I'm not sure that I understand the question, Councillor.
Well, was the works and performing the works compared between the different tenderers? You know, so if, for example, if one is done quicker, then that would score higher.
So in the qualitative criteria obviously assess the ability for the contractors variously to deliver the works, and they all qualified with scores above 6 in the qualitative criteria. The actual delivery of the project, all of the contractors stated that they were able to deliver the contract in the contract period.
And my second question is, will that be ready before start of next season? And you can take that on notice.
I'll have to take that on notice, thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Item 10.3.1, Tender 2 of 2022, provision of annual and perennial weed control in natural areas. This report considers submissions received from the advertising of Tender 2 of 22 for the provision of annual and perennial weed control in natural areas. The report outlines the assessment process used during the evaluation and recommends approval of the tender that provides the best value of money to the offer to the city. I also emphasise there's a confidential attachment to this report.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, any questions on this item? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, looking at page 12 of the officer's report under financial implications, the full cost of the works is included in the 22-23 operating budget. Doesn't specify in the report though how much. So I'm just wondering how much is the works as covered in the annual operating budget, please.
Mr Atwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Choi. So in the confidential attachment, there's an estimate of the total value of the works. Over the 4-year period, it's getting towards the vicinity of $1 million or $800,000 over the 4 years, and those funds are allocated within the operating budget of the city.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just with regard to the costs, so they are quite significant. Have we had cost escalation with regard to these services over the last few years?
Mr Atwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Brenda Brandis. So the current incumbent of the city's weed spraying contract is the same contractor that is being recommended here. The last time the contract was awarded was in 2019. Since 2019, the price escalation to this current tender is with one chemical product 15%, with the other chemical product 16%, and that would appear to be well within the inflationary pressures over that period, and particularly when you recognise that chemicals in the agricultural industry have increased by, in some cases, 100% in the last several years.
Thank you, Mr Atwell.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.3.2, Tender 5 of 2022, provision of verge side collection service. This report advises of the failure to execute a contract under Tender 5 of 22 for the provision of verge side collection service with company Western Maize as authorised by Council in August, and proposes Council accept an alternative tender offer which is now considered the most advantageous to the city. Again, there's a confidential attachment to this report.
Thank you. Councillors, any queries? I think Councillor Choi was first there.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple of queries. First of all, what happened with the current waste contractor? Is that one of the companies listed or?
Mr Atwell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Choi, the current waste contractor, well, the contractor who most recently held the contract for delivering this service, because right now we've had an interim contractor in place, but the previous contractor is no longer working in this industry. They have moved to the country because of a reduction overall in the verge side collection across the metropolitan area, so they've moved away from the metropolitan area.
Councillor Bard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this is just a global question, and so I hope I'll have made it clear enough. But I did understand from the material that the council had paid for waste space, and that this would be now foregone in the new contract. And I was therefore wondering, is there an opportunity for the city to on-sell the space that had been pre-purchased?
Mr Atwell. I understand if you had to took that one on notice.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Navard, I'm not sure that I clearly understand what you're asking me, but if you are asking me, do we have the ability to sell the disposal volume that would have been with Cleanaway as opposed to going with the current contractor for the October pickup, the answer is no, because we simply have a contract with Cleanaway to dispose of hard waste to landfill, but it's not for a specific volume, and it's not something that we could on-sell to anyone else.
Any further questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just wondering whether at this point in time, this might be an opportunity for the city to review other local government systems in terms of the way...
Councillor Choi, I don't think that's relevant to this item.
I believe it is, Mr Mayor.
Other systems?
Well, no, just in relation to this tender, okay, I'll reword it.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Did the city consider any other systems, such as valet service, drop-off days, that kind of thing, for white goods when looking at, putting on a new contractor?
You may recall during the budget workshops, we actually raised that as a specific item, and we will undertake. So in May, we discussed that and looked at other opportunities, and we will look at those.
Any further questions? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Could I actually call this one behind closed doors when we go to close items for confidential matters?
You can. We'll deal with that when we do go behind closed doors.
Thank you.
Any further questions on this item that can be asked in open chamber, councillors? No. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.3.3, proposed modification of condition of planning approval, lot 24, number 19, Redmond Street, Salter Point. To consider an application to modify a condition of planning approval for a single residential house operating as a display home at lot 24, 19, Redmond Street, Salter Point. This item is referred to council as the application relates to the use of display home and the application received objections during the advertising period. The application therefore falls outside the delegation to officers. For the reasons outlined in the report, it is recommended the application to modify a planning condition be approved.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, Councillor De Souza was first off the mark there.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is basically, so this is the last of the 3 or 4 display homes to come to council to approve, and they all, as I understand, expire in December. So is the view of the administration that when they all expire that it will not be renewed?
Ms Mullen, can I send that your way?
Thank you, through the chair. If the developer submits a further development application, the city will obviously consider that. We can't preempt or give a view as to how the city will deal with a further development application. Thank you.
Any further questions on this item, councillors? I think Councillor De Souza was first off the mark there.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to follow up, so they will be considered as 4 separate items, and the reason I ask is because if they're 4 display homes adjoining each other, that might have a joint effect on amenities. So I'm just wondering whether the city will consider it individually or jointly.
Or cumulatively, Councillor De Souza, is that what you were going for? Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. Each application would be considered on its individual merits, but we would obviously be mindful of any cumulative impact within that particular area. I am aware of changed circumstances in relation to the dwelling, so I think it's very unlikely that we would actually, in any case, see a further application for the use as display homes.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, just referring to the deputation, and also my understanding of the officer's report is that the applicant has been in non-compliance with the approved DA. Is that correct?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. The city has received complaints from residents that there's been non-compliance, and these have been investigated by our compliance team. Thank you.
Further question, Councillor Russell?
No, in terms of that the DA has expired and they've been operating outside of that DA because of that.
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, the previous approval had expired, and the city was aware that the use was being operated.
Okay, so from the last time that this came up to council with the adjacent properties, I understood from the city that a breach of a DA, such as what we've just discussed, is not an allowed or valid reason for refusal of a new DA. Is that correct?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, the general practice is a development or an applicant is neither advantaged nor disadvantaged by the fact that development has already taken place or is continuing to take place. So in short, that's correct. It's not a valid reason for refusal just because there's been non-compliance in the past.
Okay, so it's a good thing we don't bring up our children in accordance with planning laws.
I'd just like to take a moment to welcome our local member, Jeff Baker, MLA. Welcome to the meeting. It's very good to see you here. Councillors, any further questions on this item? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just following the deputation this evening on this item, I just have a couple of queries. Firstly, are display homes a land use in the proposed LPS 7?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm not able to answer that question. I'm sorry, I'd have to take that on notice.
All right. Any further counts? I think Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If the officer's recommendation is supported, what would the process be for the applicant if they want to seek an alternative outcome here?
Not sure I understand the question. Do you, Ms Mullen? Yeah, would you like to perhaps clarify that, Councillor Brenda Abrandis?
Yeah, certainly. So the motion as it stands, if this is actually approved at the ordinary council meeting and the applicant was not satisfied with that outcome, what would be the process they'd need to go through?
Ms Mullen?
Through the chair. Sorry. So for clarification, I mean, if the application was refused? Sorry?
Yeah, so if, as it currently stands, is if this officer's recommendation was supported as it currently stands, but the applicant was actually not happy with that outcome, what sort of course would they need to undertake to actually get a better outcome? Or
Just to clarify, you're asking if the application was approved but the applicant was unhappy with that result. Did I hear you correctly?
correct. So if the applicant wants to actually extend that application, could they actually do that, or are they locked into this motion as it currently stands?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the clarification. So there's two avenues open. The applicant could appeal to the State Administrative Tribunal to have that condition changed, so it's a longer period, or they can wait until closer to the time the application is due to the period ends, and they can seek a further development approval.
Councillor Brenda Abrandis?
Sorry, and just final question, was there any indication that the applicant did actually want to extend beyond that period?
Ms Mullen?
Through the chair, at this stage, no, there's no indication. Thank you.
Any further questions on this item, councillors? No. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.3.4, proposed change of use to use not listed short-term accommodation on Lot 2, Unit 1, 45 Mary Street, Como. To consider an application for development approval for change of use to a use not listed short-term accommodation at Lot 2, Unit 1 of 45 Mary Street, Como. The item is referred to Council as the proposed land use in the Town Planning Scheme is use not listed in the Town Planning Scheme number 6 falls outside of the delegation to officers. For these reasons outlined in the report, it's recommended the application be approved subject to conditions.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Saladin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and these can be taken on notice. I only put them together just before the meeting. So my first question is with regards to the National Construction Code. The existing 4 apartments, I believe, are Class 2 sole occupancy, but I believe that the change of use will cause the property to be classified as a Class 3 building. So I know this has consequences in terms of safety, such as fire, disabled access, energy requirements. So has this been addressed? And if so, what has been put in place to ensure compliance?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. The class of building under the National Construction Codes is not actually relevant to the determination of the planning application. However, I can advise that there would actually be no change in class. The class would remain as a Class 2 building. Thank you.
Thank you. And there seems to be plenty of accommodation options in the appropriately zoned neighbourhood centre commercial precinct, also known as the Preston Street precinct. So I'm just asking, what is the purpose or rationale of allowing developments such as these to infiltrate into residential areas?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you. The opportunity for a development such as this to take place in another area is not actually material planning consideration. We have to actually determine a development application on the basis of what's actually lodged with the city. So we're actually considering the address at which the application is located, and not any alternatives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, although this application is for the 1 unit, the approval relates to the whole of the land. So what is to stop the entire 4 units being let out in similar manner?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, the chair. The application actually relates to Lot 2, but Unit 1, 45 Mary Street, Como, so it's actually quite specific to the particular unit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just wondering whether the city needs to consider the proposed LPS 7 as a proposed planning instrument as required by the deemed provisions of the regulations with this application, and if not, why not, please?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. The city has had regard to LPS 7. However, given the stage that LPS 7 is at in terms of advertising, no weight is to be given to that particular document in determining development applications at the present time. Thank you.
Councillor Credland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I had a few questions. First of all, does Ms Mullen have any comments on the answers given by the presenter or the applicant tonight in relation to questions I asked in respect of whether or not Mary Street was a quiet area, a residential area, or whether or not Preston Street was a local neighbourhood centre area or in fact a destination centre? And if so, are either of those relevant in any case to approval of this matter?
Ms Mullen, would you want those one at a time, or have you got all of those? Okay, great.
Thank you, through the chair. The report actually details the area in which the application the application site is located, which is considered to be a residential area. In terms of the Preston Street, that again is actually referenced within the report as the Preston Street precinct, which is regarded as an activity hub made up of several cafes, restaurants, small retail shops, a tavern, supermarket and cinema. And because of the subject site's proximity to that precinct hub, activity hub, it's considered to be an appropriate location for this type of development. Thank you.
Councillor Cridland.
Yes, I read the management plan that's in the attachments and noted the sparseness of its provisions. Is the city satisfied that that will deal with any issues arising from its use of short stay, noting that it doesn't identify who is going to be the manager, what the phone number is that they're going to be available on, and how the local residents are going to find out of either the phone number or the identity of the person who can be contacted if there is some sort of presumably noise or other complaint to be made.
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. The city is satisfied with the content of the management plan, which is considered to be comprehensive. It is noted that the actual contact details aren't included within the management plan. That wouldn't be expected at this stage because obviously this is a published document that's published on the internet. So those details would be added at the approval stage. Thank you.
And final set of questions. We received, all of us this afternoon, on who were elected, a lengthy email from a neighbour which purported to put in some detailed submissions in respect of this matter. Is it possible for, and they weren't able to give a deputation because of the lateness that they put that in, is it possible for councillors to get some sort of note, whether it's in the bulletin or otherwise, in response to all the issues that have been raised? And if there are any substantive issues, will you give the applicant a chance to respond to those as well?
Ms Mullen.
Through the chair, thank you. I think via questions I have actually addressed all bar one of the particular concluding issues that were raised within the submission that was made. But I'm happy to provide a response to the conclusions again in writing to members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Is the application applied for a bed and breakfast or an Airbnb? Is there a difference in terms of the application for those application purposes?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair, and I think that's actually the last point that's included in the conclusion of the submission that's just been referenced. The application did state bed and breakfast. However, as no breakfast is provided, this isn't a bed and breakfast establishment. It is a short-term accommodation use that's a use not listed within the city. So it's not a bed and breakfast use. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and Ms Mullen. How much weight is given to amenity concerns as raised by neighbouring property owners, please?
Ms Mullen.
Thank you, through the chair. Amenity has been considered as part of the report that's before councillors tonight. Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just my last question on this item. Just wondering, with regards to the policy 350.18 on short-term accommodation, which is relevant to this application, I note in the officer's report on page 26 that the management plan outlined 5, I think, guidelines. And I'm just wondering, I think when I looked at the management plan in the policy, there was more guidelines listed. Is that correct? Or have some not been included from the policy? Is there a reason why, if that's correct, why some weren't included
Ms
in
Mullin?
this application, please?
Thank you, through the chair. The list that's contained within the policy is not a prescriptive list. Officers will assess a management plan that's been submitted and assess whether it conforms with the intent of the policy. And in this instance, felt that it did. Thank you.
Any further questions on this item, councillors? No. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.4.1, listing of payments August 2022. This report presents to Council a list of accounts paid under delegated authority between 1 and 31 August.
Councillors, any questions on this item? I think Councillor Choi was first there.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just looking at apparent increases in contract staff. I think there was about $70,000 in the listing in this month alone, August 22. That just seemed a little bit unusually high. I mean, obviously I haven't gone back and checked this time last year or anything like that, but I'm just wondering, does that seem like quite a high figure for 1 month, $70,000 around roughly for contract staff?
Should I send that to Mr Adams or Mr Laycock? Mr Laycock?
Through the chair, the contract staff expenditure obviously varies, and it's impacted by many factors. So obviously vacancies at the city plays a significant a role in contract staff costs, and then also contract staff can also relate to certain activities that has a seasonality attaching to it. Given the current amount of vacancies at the city and the fact that we just started a new financial year, I wouldn't necessarily say $70,000 being spent on contract staff is exceptional. If you were to place that in context, that overall, at the end of the day, contract staff really just facilitate work to be done, and the cost that you're seeing includes on costs as well.
Any further questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Navard.
Mr Mayor, I was noticing that Adecco is a new preferred supplier, and the staff costs were total $19,383.25 for this month. And I just wondered, is there a facility for letting us know what kinds of staffing activities Adecco would be supplying? Is that a reasonable question?
Mr Laycock? Or is that Mr Adams? So I should be directing that to.
Sorry, yeah, we can let you know what services they provide. I'll just have to take it on notice.
Okay.
Councillor Choi, did you have another question there?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just wondering, just following on from my last question, has it been, or is it generally like a trend where there's an increase in contract staff over FTEs, or is the FTE sort of amount still kind of similar pattern, and we just are requiring for the reasons that Mr Laycock, and thanks Mr Laycock for your previous response, outlined, that figure is that figure, separate to the FTE costs? I'm just trying to work out, is it a new trend or a pattern, that's all.
Mr Adams?
So as Mr Laycock stated, generally contract staff are used to fill existing vacancies. So there may be occasions with specific projects, for example, where we take on contract staff for particular periods of time, but that's normally factored into the project cost. The current situation that we find ourselves in is a tight labour market, with it being very difficult to recruit staff to vacant positions, and that's why you might be seeing a little bit of an uptick in the amount of agency staffing that we're requiring at the moment. We've had a number of recruitment and selection processes where we've failed to come up with appropriate candidates to fill those positions. So it is a bit of an issue for us at the moment, but it is something that we do monitor on an ongoing basis as well to make sure that our staffing costs do remain within budget.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And councillors, at this point, I do note that some of these questions are quite operational in nature. I would encourage councillors to take advantage of the ability to speak to officers or ask questions of officers offline, as we are trying to run efficient meetings here. I will be making more use of Part 7 of the standing orders going forwards. With that, are there any more questions on relation to this item? No, thank you. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.4.2, Monthly Financial Statements, August 2022. The monthly financial statements are provided within attachments A through I, with a higher level analysis contained in the comments for the report.
Any questions on this item, councillors? No, thank you. Next item, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.4.3, Action on Condition of Planning Approval Civic Heart. This report to council is for information purposes and explains the action that has been taken in regard to a condition of planning approval for the Civic Heart development.
Any questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Navard was first.
Okay, so the city has resolved to hand back the lease benefit, but one of the things I was wondering about was in the assessment, was there consideration for the social benefit that would have been provided by the space for community use in the ground floor of Civic Heart?
Ms Lummer?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, we did consider a number of different scenarios. However, given some of the requirements of activating that space and then the cost of activating and having staff in there, precluded going forward with that.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the officer's report, it states the development application included the use of tenancy T5, 65 square metre ground floor level tenancy fronting Lavisher Road, which would be provided to the City for Local Government's shopfront services at the peppercorn rate for a 10-year period. Now, hence, my reading of this application is that this is included within the application in order to satisfy some agreement, for example, a condition of sale. So is there or was there some agreement that council need to be aware of in relation to this item?
Ms Lummer?
Any condition of sale has nothing to do with the planning approval.
Thank you, Ms Lummer. Councillor Russell, got your light on there. Another question?
Yes, thank you. The officer's report states that element 14.1 of the Town Planning Scheme 6, which provides at least one facility available for use by external parties, groups or individuals such as a meeting room, boardroom, lecture theatre and so forth, was offered to the City of South Perth on a peppercorn lease over 10 years. As the City has now rescinded this offer, can the City confirm that this space will still function as per element 14.1 as a community benefit?
Ms Lummer?
Thank you. No, we can't confirm that, and I don't believe that it's likely that that will occur.
Thank you. Councillor Russell, another question?
So just to clarify, the City do not understand the consequence of their action in terms of this facility.
Perhaps you might want to reword that question, Councillor Russell.
No.
Councillor Cridland?
Yeah, if I can just jump in. While Councillor Russell does whatever he wants to do. But I was listening to the answer and there was just a bit I didn't understand. And it was just the last part of the answer where Director Lummer said something about it won't happen or something? Sorry.
Ms Lummer, are you happy to clarify that?
So I think the question was, will this space still be used for community purposes? And can we confirm that? No, we can't confirm what that use will be, because essentially the use of the unit will be handed back to the developer, and then the developer will decide what to do with that unit. So we can't confirm what will be done with it, but I don't think it's likely that the developer will use it for a community purpose.
Okay.
Councillor Russell, did you still have a question there?
Yes, so it's highly likely then that that element 14.1 will not be satisfied for this development.
Is that a question?
That's a question.
Ms Lummer?
It is acknowledged that that the condition related to that, so therefore what happens with that will affect that clause. But again, this is a matter, it's not a decision of the city, it's not a decision of officers, it's a decision of the minister. And she made the decision on the initial development, so it's again her decision as to how she moves forward with that condition.
Okay, thank you. Regarding the Minister's Condition 14, which makes reference to the leasing strategy and management plan for this room, the T5, this condition is agnostic to whom the premises are leased to. Could the city advise the status of this document?
Ms Lummer?
Sorry, what document?
The leasing strategy and management plan, which is actually referenced within that condition.
There has been no leasing strategy management plan prepared.
Okay, thank you. So, so again, referring to the Minister's Condition 14, you know, as this pertains only to the T5 leasing strategy and management plan, that's what it refers to, in terms of its approval or otherwise, then I'm having a bit of difficulty reconciling how the city can use a condition relating to just the approval.
Councillor Russell, this isn't a forum for debate. If you could make your question succinct, please.
Oh, I'm just providing a bit of preamble. So
it's the standing orders are the standing orders, Councillor Russell. The questions are to be succinct.
Standing orders apply at an agenda briefing?
They do, yes.
Okay. Can the city just explain clearly how Condition 17 is relevant to allowing the cancellation of element 14.1?
Ms Lummer?
Thank you, through the chair. So it's Condition 14, and the condition will be amended by the minister.
No, it's Condition 17, sorry.
Actually, Councillor Russell, I am going to clarify that. They don't apply per se, but as the presiding member, if I want to apply them, I'm advised that I can. So that's the process we're following.
Okay.
Any further questions on this item, councillors?
Oh, I think I'm waiting for a response.
My apologies.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Condition 17 is a completely different condition about noise management. Is that what you're referring to? I have the conditions of planning approval here in my hand, and condition 17 is...
Apologies, yes, it is Condition 14.
Thank you. So would you like to repeat the question, sorry?
Yeah, so look, just regarding that Condition 14, which makes reference to this strategy and management plan, I'm just trying to understand how the city, and I'd like the city to explain clearly how this condition is relevant to allowing the cancellation of element 14.1, as it only refers to a document.
Ms Lummer, do you need to take that one on notice?
I think I might need a little bit more explanation, and yeah, I'll take it on notice. Thank you.
All right. Perhaps if Councillor Russell can clarify any matters you're not sure about offline. Councillors, any further questions on this item? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. With regard to the financial implications in the financial implications table that's included on page 42, it indicates that part of the cost of the project to deliver the community benefit is inclusive of GST. Could I just have an understanding as to the reasons for GST being added back and not being deducted as if we were to get a refund on GST?
Ms Lama, should I direct that your way, or is that one for Mr Adams? Or should it be taken on notice?
I'm sorry, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question.
Right. Mr Adams?
Yeah, sorry, I'll take that on notice because I didn't prepare this. So I'll have a look at why that's been included.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Brenda Abrandis?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just with regard to the cost of utilising the space, it's been estimated at $180,000 per annum, and that includes strata fees, utilities, outgoings, IT communications, and also 2 staff costs. Obviously, a significant part of the $180,000 to have 2 staff on site, 9 to 5 presence, as it's indicated. Would that require an additional 2 staff, or could the staff be obtained from within the existing City of South Perth structure and be relocated or repurposed, so it wouldn't be an incremental cost, but it would just be an existing staff cost?
Who should I direct that to?
Well, I can just say that some of those discussions were the discussions that we had before we brought this matter forward.
All right. Councillor, Mr Adams.
I just wanted to add that the space has to be used for a particular purpose, and given the purpose that is required, then just taking 2 staff from somewhere else and putting them in there, we couldn't find a use that would accommodate what the requirement is for the use of that space and allow us to transfer 2 internal staff down there to make sure that the space was being used in that regard.
Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Adams. With regard to the use that we could apply staff at the Civic Heart, what are the criteria for the staff or the use that would need to be able to apply staff for?
Sorry, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, so Mr Adams just spoke about specific purposes for which the staff could be utilised, or the actual Civic Heart location could be used. So I'm just wondering what are the criteria that we actually need to actually achieve to have staff on site?
I'm going to allow this one, but I'm going to ask that future questions on this item be taken offline, because I think we are getting into an unnecessary level of detail. Mr Adams?
So I can't remember the exact wording that was used, but we can provide that through to you. But yeah, it was to do with the community use aspect. So.
And also a requirement for it to be manned certain hours as well.
Activated. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who hasn't already asked a question on this item who would like to ask a question? Councillor Choi?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a few questions here. The first one is the applicant is mentioned on page 41 of the officer's report. I'm just confirming that the applicant is FIMBA. Is that correct?
Ms Lama?
Sorry. Well, there's no applicant as such because the application, has already been approved. But the owner of the property is South Perth Civic Triangle Company, or PTY Limited, and the city has been dealing with officers from FIMBA who acts on their behalf.
Councillor Choi?
Thank you, through the Chair, Ms Lama. My next question is related to that same paragraph. So just looking at the commercial tenancy as proposed over the 10-year period through a net present value calculation, is it best practice method to use this calculation, and also for the applicant who is being represented by the developer to come up with the value for a cash in lieu contribution?
Ms Lama?
Yeah, Mr Adams can probably talk about that because he's had a look at that for me.
Yep, so they provided their net present value calculations to us. We had a look at them in terms of the assumptions that were made with regard to those, and deemed that what they were calculating was reasonable, and we're happy with the end figure that they came up with. So whilst they did the calculation, they did provide it to us, and I couldn't find anything that was significantly out of whack with how any of us would do a similar calculation.
Councillors, is there any elected member who hasn't already asked a question on this item who would like to ask a question? In that case, we're moving on to the next item. Mr Bradford? Councillor Russell, you will show respect to the presiding member. And that's your last warning.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.4.4, Property Committee. This report recommends that Council abolish the Property Committee and notes that all items in relation to property and requiring a decision of Council will be submitted directly to Council.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So in terms of this item, if the Property Committee was to be abolished and when items come to the full council, which normally would go to Property Committee, will that be made clear in the body of the report that this is something that would normally go to Property Committee but is now coming to full council?
Mr Adams?
No, we would just put it straight to council as an ordinary item.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just wondering if the main or other reason for abolishing the Property Committee meeting is because of the proposed local government reforms, specifically amended Reform Proposal 3.3, clearer guidance for meeting items that may be confidential, that specify that certain matters, including town planning and development applications, budgeting, major land transactions, leases of local government property, must be held in full public view, and anything other than CEO appointment, management of behavioural complaints about elected members, local government cybersecurity, which must remain confidential, require to have approval of the local government inspector. I'm just wondering if that has carried any weight at all in bringing this forward.
Mr Adams?
No.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Saladin.
Yeah, did the CEO get any feedback from the independent members of the Property Committee with regards to the performance of the Property Committee?
Mr Bradford.
Yeah, thanks. There have been a couple of emails, and I think I've forwarded one to the Mayor and to the presiding member of the Property Committee. Since then, there's been another email received from one of the Property Committee members, yes.
And can we see them as well?
Yes.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.4.5, proposed council meeting schedule for 2023. This report seeks council's endorsement of the City of South Perth 2023 meeting schedule.
Councillors, any questions on this item? No. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.5.1, annual policy review. The terms of reference of the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee include the responsibility for reviewing the city's policies. The review of a number of city's policies is presented for consideration of the committee and referral to council for adoption.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just wondering, with some of the policies that were pulled out at the I think it was the Audit Risk Governance Committee meeting. I'm just wondering, are councillors, elected members, able to get a copy of the Word version? So if they want to make track changes to any of those policies, they can do that, because I'm not really sure how, other than writing kind of alongside or, you know, a separate document, which might be hard for elected members to follow, how to sort of provide any amendments to any policies that we may wish to for the next meeting.
Mr Adams.
Yeah, so we don't currently have an understanding of why some of those particular policies were not included in the overall review. However, our intention is that we bring them back on a sort of a piecemeal basis so that they can be considered separately. So it'll probably take a while to get through them, but we'll do them separately at meetings going forward. And as part of that process, we'll send out the document for we'll circulate the document in a Word format so that you can provide some feedback on it, because we need to know before we can obviously take on board any of those suggestions and then present a reviewed document back to council for adoption at a council meeting.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillors, any further questions on this item? I do have one. At the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee meeting last week, there was some discussion about how annual policy reviews might be conducted in the future. I also seem to recall some earlier discussions on the same topic some months ago. How will the process for future annual policy reviews be different going forwards? And perhaps that's to Mr Adams.
So at the March ARGC meeting, I did make mention that subsequent to completing this current annual policy review, we'd be looking at developing and implementing a policy development and review framework so that policies could be reviewed on a cyclical basis and that all policies would not need to come to council at the same time. This would include things such as delegation to administration to do administrative changes such as updating legislative references without the need to come to council. Once we've completed this current policy review, we'll have the resources that we can assign to completing the framework and present it to council for adoption as the way that we go forward with policy reviews.
Thank you. Councillors, any other questions on this item? No. Next item, please, Mr Bradford.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Item 10.5.2, Audit Register Progress Report. This report provides an update on the progress of actions included in the Audit Register. The Audit Register includes all open audit findings that have previously been accepted by the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee.
Any questions, councillors? No. In that case, that wraps up item 10. We move on to item 12 now, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. The only item on item 12 is item 12.1, which is a notice of motion by Councillor Mary Choi entitled RAF. I've got a couple of questions on this one. My first question, and it's probably to, I suspect, Mr Bradford. This notice of motion is quite detailed, it's quite prescriptive. From a governance perspective, does the CEO really require this level of detail from council in order for him to pursue the council's stated objective of planning for and promoting the development of recreation and aquatic facilities to service City of South Perth needs, or for the CEO to implement council's decision from November 2020, which is referenced at page 65 of the agenda?
Given that it relates to governance, I might ask Mr Adams to answer that one.
Mr Adams.
So my view would be that whilst it's open for council to request the CEO to carry out certain functions on behalf of council, it's more usual for such requests to be less prescriptive and focus more on the outcome sought to be achieved. Council's already made a decision that requires the CEO to advocate for funding from the state government, and the CEO has been actively pursuing this outcome as outlined in the report. For council to then prescribe how the CEO should communicate with the state, in what timeframe and with which specific people, could be seen as interfering in administration and affecting the ability of the CEO to carry out the previous decision. It should also be noted that the CEO is employed in no small part because of his expertise and knowledge in such negotiations and how to navigate the processes of government. So for council to make a decision that's inconsistent with an already adopted approach does not appear to represent sound governance.
Thank you, Mr Adams. My second question, and I don't mind if it's Mr Adams or Mr Bradford, but in the opinion of the City Administration, will this motion improve or diminish the City's chances of securing a funding contribution from the state government for the RAF?
I can provide my opinion that there's little chance that this motion will do anything to improve the City's chances of receiving state funding. Whether it diminishes the City's chances remains to be seen. However, it should be noted that the CEO already has an appointment with the relevant minister on the day immediately following the decision on this motion.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Is there anyone else? Councillor Saladin.
Yeah, thank you, Director Adams. So with regards to that meeting with Mr. Templeman, is it, you know, the administration's opinion that this motion would be helpful or unhelpful to that meeting?
Mr. Bradford?
Well, it's not necessary, and I don't think it's going to be particularly helpful.
Councillor Saladin?
So would it be more appropriate if council were to hold off making any decisions on the RAF until after the administration has spoken to Mr. Templeman, and perhaps the administration has had some time to make a report and bring that to council?
Mr. Bradford?
I think as I outlined earlier in the week, well, last week, we have a meeting with the Minister on the 28th of September where we'll be discussing the RAF. I think we've got a workshop booked for councillors on the 10th or 11th of October dealing with the RAF, where we'll talk about the current state and what the options are, and also we'll have some feedback from hopefully the state and the Commonwealth in that time frame, and then that will provide the basis for developing options that we bring back to council, hopefully October, I would expect.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Councillor Cridland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few questions. First of all, my first question is to the CEO, and this is in particular in relation to the second paragraph of Councillor Choi's motion, which refers to you writing to our local member, and it's good to see him here tonight because of his interest in this matter. And that paragraph asks you to write to him to confirm his support for the RAF. And my question, CEO, is what is the utility and point of such a letter to our local member when at a briefing he told us, the councillors, that he already firmly supports the RAF and he had asked the councillors to show they supported it. And he also provided the councillors with an opportunity to ask him any questions that he had. He could answer about the RAF. So what is the point in writing to him, I ask?
Given I feel a bit awkward with the person we're talking about being in the room, and he might be in a position to actually speak to this. I actually meet regularly with Mr. Baker, talk about a range of issues across the city, including the RAF. We have met and spoken probably 40 or 50 times on the RAF, and Mr. Baker has provided his guidance and facilitated meetings with the state government and on how we approach it. Given I update him regularly, I don't think there's any benefit in me writing to him, and I might even be able to ask him tonight, given that he's in the room. But given the close communication we have, I'd see no benefit in writing.
It's possibly unorthodox, but given the importance of the item and given the question asked, Mr. Baker, was there anything that you'd want to add to that?
No, that's all correct what he's just said.
All right, thank you. Councillor Cridland?
My next question relates to the next paragraph of Councillor Choi's motion, and it relates to you, or effectively tells you to write to the WA Department of Treasury to perform an evaluation and review of costing of the RAF project capital construction cost, operating expenditure and cash flow assumptions and revenue forecasts, and cost-benefit analysis based on the Treasury business case submitted in 2021, in light of current market conditions and factors including but not limited to inflation, materials, construction costs, escalations, labour shortages, etc. So it's quite a detailed thing that you're told to do. Is it your opinion, CEO, that it's likely that the WA Department of Treasury would do all of that?
Mr. Bradford?
The Treasury Department's very busy doing the business of government, in my experience. And when we sent the investment business case, we actually submitted it to the Minister for Sport, the Minister who's the responsible minister, and he is the person that we interface with. I understand that he did refer the business case to other departments to provide advice back to the Minister, which is the role of government, is to provide advice to ministers. I actually don't believe it's the responsibility of the Department of Treasury to undertake evaluations of the one that's described and reviews on behalf of local government. I certainly haven't heard of that occurring, and I don't believe that it's up to local government to tell Treasury how they would review the business case to make an investment decision for themselves or for us. They've got their own processes in place and a lot of expertise in assessing these things for the state, and I would expect them to do that on behalf of the state. If the state government requires additional information from the city to support their deliberations or feedback for us, I expect that they would raise it with us.
My last question is a question in relation to the second last paragraph of the reasons given by Councillor Choi for her motion, and where she states that council decisions are being made on the RAF project with a lack of certainty around state government support and an equal funding commitment. And my question, CEO, is was a formal funding decision by the state government in any way relevant to the council's decision on whether to appoint a project manager for the project in either December 2021 or June 2022?
Mr Bradford.
The decision to appoint a project manager was a requirement under the federal, one of the milestones under the federal funding agreement. So we had to appoint a project manager as one of the milestones to comply with the federal funding agreement. There was no requirement in the federal funding agreement to have secured state funding at that point. In fact, I'd have to check the agreement, but state funding is not required until several subsequent steps, as I recall. We've been advised by the Commonwealth we are currently technically in breach of that agreement, and that we deliberately structured the project manager contract so that there would be no expenditure incurred. We'd satisfy the appointment, but would not incur any expenditure until council made a decision to progress to the next stage of the project. This was made clear to all tenderers, and it was understood by the recommended company. The decision on the state funding was therefore not a prerequisite or a requirement for that appointment.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Thank you. Councillor Cridlin? No. Councillors. Councillor Saladin.
Yeah, so just on that topic, with regards to that decision, there was some suggestions tonight by deputations and also by some elected members, if I can recall, that the RAF's not dead, but the risk hadn't increased with regards to that project, which I was just confused by that. So can you please explain how the risk has increased in terms of killing the RAF from that decision?
Mr Bradford?
With regard to the risk profile for the project as a whole, the decision not to appoint the project manager in June does put us technically in breach of the federal funding agreement, and that does put the $20 million at risk. We've had a number of conversations with the Commonwealth around what we would need to do in order to retain that funding, and we continue to have those discussions. They remind us that we are technically in breach of the agreement, and that a decision by a minister will be required when we want to, depending on what action we take. So that in itself increases the risk profile for the project substantially. So we are now, there's several factors we have to deal with, the uncertainty around the state funding in terms of working on that. the added complexity of now being technically in breach of the federal funding agreement, and also the passage of time in terms of making sure we have current cost estimates and all of those sorts of things, and procurement processes that allow us to retain the people necessary to develop the project. So there is no doubt that the risk profile of the project has increased, and the decision not to appoint the project manager is a significant contributing factor to that.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, any additional questions on this item? No. In that case, at this stage of the meeting, we need to go behind closed doors to ask at least one question. So, yes, for those of you in the gallery, thank you very much for your attendance this evening. And we will close the doors fairly shortly. We are live streaming again. Thank you. All right, that's item 15 dispensed with. We move on to item 16, which is closure. I declare the meeting closed at 8:35 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance and good night.